Some countries are not misunderstood because they are hidden. They are misunderstood because the world keeps looking at them through the same small window. A few images repeat, a few headlines return, a few fears grow louder than the lives unfolding quietly beyond them. And over time, a place that is vast, human, and full of light can be reduced to something narrow enough to fit inside a rumor. But what happens when we step away from that window? What changes when a country is not seen from a screen, but from a road at sunrise? From a market before noon, from a coastline at dusk, from the quiet space between ancient stones? What do we begin to notice when we stop asking what we have been told to fear and begin asking what we have never been taught to see? For many outside observers, Mexico arrives already framed. A border road under a hard sun, a crowded avenue moving through heat and traffic, a breaking story passing across a screen before the next one replaces it. The image feels familiar, but familiarity is not the same as understanding. It can make a country seem known before it has ever been listened to. Distance flattens everything. It removes the texture of daily life, the softness of morning, the sound of footsteps across old stone, the smell of food rising from a small kitchen, the glow of painted walls after rain. It turns people into background and landscapes into scenery. It makes a living nation appear like a single problem, when in truth, it is a world of contrasts moving far beyond the frame. On the ground, Mexico opens differently. The first thing is not noise, it is light. Morning slides across balconies, tiled roofs, church towers, and narrow streets, still cool from the night. A door opens somewhere. A bicycle crosses a patch of sun. Vendors begin arranging fruit in careful rows before the crowds arrive. The colors are vivid, but they do not feel placed there for visitors. They belong to the rhythm of the day. Then the country begins to widen. Along the coast, waves move in long silver lines toward the sand. Inland mountains rise in blue layers behind towns and villages. In the distance, old stones stand beneath the sky, holding a memory that has outlived empires' borders and passing generations. In city streets, traffic hums beside murals, markets, cafes, and plazas where evening gathers slowly around families and music. This is not another version of Mexico. It is the same country seen with a wider lens. The misconception begins to loosen when the camera slows down, when a market becomes hands, steam flowers, fruit, and voices. When a plaza becomes children running, elders, resting musicians tuning, and neighbors crossing paths. When a street becomes doorways, shadows open windows. Sleeping dogs and the patience of ordinary life. So much is missed when fear becomes the only language. The turquoise water is missed. The desert sunset is missed. The mountain mist is missed. The ancient walls, the handmade textiles, the food prepared by touch and memory, the quiet dignity of people carrying another day forward, all of it remains outside the story when the story is too small. Mexico is not asking to be made simple. No real country can be simple. It carries difficulty and beauty, old wounds and living pride, ancient memory and modern motion. Its identity is not frozen in ruins, and it is not defined by headlines. It is carried in workers opening shops, cooks pressing dough by hand, artists painting walls, families crossing plazas, musicians filling night streets with sound, and cities that continue to reinvent themselves under the same wide sky. As the first image begins to fall away, the land itself starts to speak. Not loudly, not all at once, but through distance, through color, through the slow widening of the horizon. Mexico is not a single landscape. It is a country that changes its face as you move through it, shifting from dry northern deserts to green southern forests, from mountain towns to tropical shores, from crowded avenues to quiet roads where the sky feels enormous. Farther south and east, the atmosphere changes. The air grows warmer, heavier, greener. Trees gather close. Water appears in hidden places, clear and blue beneath stone, reflecting sunlight in broken pieces. Jungle paths carry the sound of insects, birds, leaves, and distant footsteps. The country that seemed dry and open a moment ago now feels enclosed alive, breathing through roots and shade. Then the land rises again. Mountains pull towns upward into cooler air. Clouds drift close to the ridges. Roads bend along slopes where houses cling to hillsides and church towers appear between rooftops. In these highland places, the morning can feel almost suspended with mist moving slowly over the valleys, and the first sounds of the day echoing from street to street. This is what a stereotype cannot hold. It cannot hold the desert and the jungle in the same breath. It cannot hold a coastline of turquoise water and a town wrapped in mountain fog. It cannot hold ancient stones, modern skylines, fishing villages, colonial streets, and forests dark with rain. A stereotype needs a flat surface. Mexico does not offer one. From above, the country seems to unfold in layers. Dry earth gives way to green fields. Green fields give way to cities. Cities give way to mountains, and mountains eventually fall toward the sea. The coast appears suddenly bright and open with white sand, dark rocks, rolling waves, and water that changes color with the hour. Some shores feel calm and luminous. Others feel wild, shaped by wind cliffs and the steady force of the Pacific. In the old towns, the scale becomes human again. Colorful walls lean into narrow streets. Iron balconies cast thin shadows in the afternoon. Church bells move through the air, mixing with footsteps. Engines, birds, and voices. Doors open into courtyards. Windows glow at dusk. The past is not locked away behind glass. It stands quietly in the walls, in the plazas, in the worn stone beneath people's feet. And then, almost without warning, the rhythm shifts into the modern pulse of a great city. Traffic gathers in long streams of light. Towers rise beyond tree-lined avenues. Cafes fill parks, breathe murals spread across walls, and the night begins to hum with movement. This too belongs to the same country, not a contradiction, but another layer. To reduce Mexico to one idea is to miss the way it keeps changing. Every region alters the mood. Every road seems to reveal a different temperature of light. In some places, the land feels ancient and quiet. In others, it feels young, crowded, restless, and full of invention. The country is not asking to be simplified. It is asking to be seen in its full width. Misunderstanding often begins when complexity is replaced by a single image. A place becomes easier to talk about, but harder to truly know. The real Mexico resists that kind of shrinking. It stretches across deserts, forests, volcanoes, cities, beaches, ruins, villages, and fields, carrying more landscapes than any quick impression can contain. And the farther the journey goes, the more the old frame begins to break. The country grows wider than expectation. Softer in some places, harsher in others, always more textured than the story told from far away. What once seemed familiar becomes unfamiliar again in the best way. It becomes open. It becomes alive. To understand this land, we have to keep moving beyond the first image, past the border roads and borrowed fears, past the simple words people use when they do not want to look closely. Because here beyond the narrow frame, Mexico does not become smaller. It expands. Long before the modern noise, before the crowded avenues and glowing skylines, another Mexico was already here. It was shaped in stone, aligned with sky and shadow, and built by civilizations whose presence still rises from the land with quiet power. Across ancient cities, ceremonial spaces, and weathered walls, the country carries a memory that feels older than speech. It does not need to explain itself. It waits beneath the sun, in the silence between footsteps, in the texture of stone warmed by morning light. At Teotihuacan, the day begins slowly. Pale light stretches across broad avenues and climbs the sides of the pyramids, turning their edges gold before the heat settles in. The scale is immense, but the feeling is not only about size. It is about stillness. Steps rise toward the sky. Shadows fall across the ancient ground. People move through the open spaces, yet the place seems to belong to a deeper rhythm, one that has survived long after the voices of its builders disappeared. Teotihuacan remains one of the great ancient cities of Mesoamerica, a place where architecture, ceremony, and landscape still meet in a single breath. Yet the most powerful moments are often found in smaller details. A worn step polished by time, a carved surface catching light at an angle, a wall where rain, wind, and centuries have softened the stone without erasing its presence. These details ask the viewer to slow down. They turn ruins into more than monuments. They become evidence of hands, minds, ceremonies, fears, hopes, and entire worlds that once stood here with purpose. But Mexico's memory is not confined to archaeological sites. It continues into streets where color and daily life move side by side. In Oaxaca, warm walls hold the afternoon sun. Courtyards open behind heavy doors. Church facades glow softly as the light begins to fall. Markets fill with woven textiles, clay flowers, fruit smoke, and the scent of food prepared with patience. Here, the past is not separated from the present. It lives in texture, in flavor, in music, in the rhythm of people walking through streets that have carried generations. In Puebla, old architecture meets the day with a different kind of brightness. Tiles shine on facades. Domes and church towers rise above streets where people shop, talk, wait, and pass through the evening light. History here is not something placed behind glass. It is touched, crossed, repaired, lived beside. A building may carry centuries of design. Yet beneath it, someone is opening a small store, greeting a neighbor, or standing in the shade as traffic moves past. This is how memory survives most deeply, not as something distant, but as something woven into ordinary life. The same feeling appears in movement. In public squares, dancers turn through color and sound, their clothing catching the sun as music gathers around them. In workshops, hands shape, clay weave, thread, paint patterns, and carve beauty from repetition. Each gesture carries knowledge older than the finished object. The beauty is not only in what is made, it is in the fact that the making continues. Across murals and painted walls, another layer speaks. Faces, workers, symbols, fields, cities, struggles, and dreams appear in color, turning public spaces into open books of memory. These images do not ask to be quiet. They remind us that Mexico remembers through more than stone. It remembers through paint, fabric, food, dance music, architecture, and the human body moving through time. This is where the country becomes impossible to reduce. Behind every simple misconception is a depth that has been building for centuries. Mexico is not beautiful only because of beaches, mountains, or bright towns. It is beautiful because it is rooted. Because beneath its colors lies endurance. Beneath its streets lies memory. Beneath its ruins lies proof that this land has always been thinking, creating, observing, and carrying meaning forward. To move through these places is to feel time layered underfoot. One era does not erase another. Stone remains beside color. Ceremony echoes beside commerce. Old walls stand near passing cars. A bell rings above a street where vendors are preparing for the day. The country keeps moving, but it does not abandon what came before. And as the light fades across pyramids, courtyards, plazas, and painted walls, Mexico feels less like a place that can be explained quickly and more like a place that must be listened to. Its beauty does not rush toward the viewer. It waits for attention. It asks us to look at the surface, then beyond it, until the stone's colors shadows and streets begin to reveal what no headline could ever hold. Because here, memory is not behind the country. It is alive inside it. After the ruins, after the stone, after the long memory of temples, plazas, and painted walls, the country begins to reveal itself in a quieter way. Not through monuments, but through mornings. Not through grand views, but through the small rhythm of people living their day. This is where Mexico becomes closest. The camera leaves the wide horizon and settles near the ground where life is measured in footsteps. Voices, steam, color, and the simple grace of ordinary work. In the early hours, markets begin before the streets are fully awake. Metal shutters rise. Baskets are carried into place. Fruit is stacked in careful rows, green beside orange, red beside yellow, each stall slowly becoming a small landscape of its own. Flowers arrive wrapped in paper. Spices sit in deep piles. Hands move with memory, weighing, cutting, arranging, folding, passing change from one palm to another. Nothing here feels staged. The beauty comes from use, from repetition, from the way a place gathers meaning, because people return to it every day. Food begins with the same patience. Dough is pressed and turned by hand. Tortillas warm over heat, softening as they rise. Steam curls into the air from pots and griddles. A kitchen, a street corner, or a small family stand becomes a center of warmth where scent reaches people before words do. In these moments, Mexico is not performing for visitors. It is feeding itself. It is remembering through flavor, through touch, through recipes carried across generations and adjusted by every household, every cook, every morning. This is the warmth that often disappears when a country is seen only from the outside. It is not loud. It does not announce itself. It lives in gestures, a plate handed across a counter, a child guided through a crowd, a vendor remembering what someone likes. An older couple sitting together as evening gathers around the plaza. These details are easy to miss if we arrive looking only for a story we already expect. But when the pace slows, they become the heart of the place. By late afternoon, the plazas begin to change. The heat softens. Shadows stretch along the stone. Families move through the square with an unhurried rhythm, children weaving between adults. Elders watching from benches, street musicians carrying melody into the open air. The same space that held quiet in the morning becomes full of movement without losing its calm. People do not simply pass through. They belong to it. They give the square its pulse. In another street, music rises from a corner and gathers the attention of those nearby. It may begin as background, but soon it becomes part of the evening itself, mixing with footsteps, conversation, the sound of dishes, the low hum of traffic, and the last birds circling above the rooftops. Here, culture is not sealed away for special occasions. It enters daily life naturally through sound, through clothing, through food, through the way people gather and make space for one another. The hands of artisans carry another kind of intimacy. Thread passes through fingers. Clay turns beneath a palm. Paint follows a pattern learned over time. A piece of pottery, a woven textile, or a carved object is more than something beautiful to look at. It is time made visible. It holds patience, skill, family memory, regional identity, and the quiet pride of making something carefully in a world that often moves too fast. There is dignity in these scenes, not the polished dignity of a postcard, but the deeper kind that comes from continuity. People working, people waiting, people laughing in the shade, people preparing food, closing shops, carrying bags, walking home, sitting together after a long day. The beauty is not separate from difficulty, and it should not be romanticized into something simple. It is more honest than that. It exists because life continues with care, even when the world outside chooses to see only the rough edges. This is why the human side of Mexico matters so deeply. Landscapes may astonish ancient ruins, may inspire cities, may impress, but it is daily life that allows a country to be felt. Without the people, the colors would lose their warmth. The markets would lose their music. The plazas would become empty stone. The streets would become scenery instead of home. And as evening settles, the country seems to soften again. Lights come on one by one. Food stalls glow at the edges of streets. Families linger a little longer in public squares. A bicycle passes through the darkening blue. Somewhere, someone is still cooking, still singing, still sweeping, still waiting for a loved one to arrive. The day does not end suddenly. It folds itself gently into night. This is the Mexico outsiders often miss, not hidden behind mountains or locked inside history, but alive in plain sight. In the market, in the kitchen, in the plaza, in the hands of a craftsperson, in the quiet exchange between neighbors. It is a beauty made of human presence, and once it is seen, the old misconceptions feel smaller than ever. Because a country is never only its landmarks, it is the lives moving between them. Beyond the markets, beyond the plazas, beyond the warmth of streets and kitchens, the country opens again. The human rhythm begins to fade into wind, water, stone, and distance. Mexico becomes wider, quieter, and more elemental. Here, the correction of perception is no longer carried by words. It is carried by the land itself. In the Yucatan, sunlight falls through openings in the earth and touches water so clear it seems almost unreal. Cenotes lie beneath stone and forest hidden from the surface until suddenly the ground gives way to blue. The air is cool inside. Voices soften. Light moves in pale beams across the water, and every ripple carries the feeling of a secret world below the noise of the day. It is not the kind of beauty that announces itself from far away. It waits in shadow, then reveals itself all at once. Along the Caribbean coast, the colors change completely. The sea turns turquoise, then glassy blue, then almost white, where the waves meet the sand. Palm trees lean into the wind. The horizon stretches without urgency. Near places like Tulum, Cancun, and the Riviera Maya, the water seems to hold more light than the sky itself. But even here, where the landscape is famous, the deeper feeling is not luxury or escape. It is contrast. A country often seen through heaviness suddenly appears weightless, open, bright, and touched by silence. On the Pacific side, the mood grows stronger. The ocean arrives with more force, rolling toward cliffs, beaches, and dark rocks in long, powerful lines. Sunset burns slowly across the water, turning the waves copper and gold before they fall back into blue. The coast here feels less polished, more restless, shaped by wind and distance. It reminds us that Mexico's beauty is not one tone. Some of it is soft enough to calm the heart. Some of it is wild enough to humble it. Then the road climbs again, leaving heat behind. Mountains rise in folds and villages appear between pine forests, ridges, and clouds. Mist moves across rooftops in the morning. Smoke rises from somewhere unseen. The air feels thinner, cooler, slower. A church tower may stand above a small town, its bells drifting through the valley while the hills hold the sound. Here, Mexico is neither beach, nor desert, nor city. It is highland quiet, a place where the landscape seems to breathe through fog and trees. And then, as if the country wanted to prove once more that no single image could contain it, the land turns dry again. Desert stretches beneath a vast sky. Cactus silhouettes stand against the evening light. The ground holds the heat of the day, while the sun lowers behind distant mountains. Nothing moves quickly. The beauty is spare, almost severe, but deeply cinematic. In the silence of the desert, space becomes emotion. This is the Mexico that disappears when the story is too narrow. The hidden pools beneath limestone, the turquoise sea, the Pacific waves, the green waterfalls, the pine-covered mountains, the desert sunset. Each landscape seems to answer the same misunderstanding in a different language. None of them asks for argument. They simply exist, immense and undeniable. What makes this natural world feel so powerful is not only its variety, but the way each place changes the body's sense of time. By the water, time slows with the tide. In the forest, it moves with shade and birdsong. In the mountains, it drifts with mist. In the desert, it stretches across the horizon until the day feels almost endless. A traveler does not pass through these places unchanged. The eye becomes quieter, the breath becomes deeper. The country begins to feel larger than any story told about it. Mexico's nature is not a background to its identity. It is part of its emotional truth. It shapes the way towns are built, the way roads bend, the way people live near water, heat, forest, and stone. It gives the country some of its brightest images and some of its deepest silences. It carries beauty not as decoration, but as force. And as the light moves from sea to jungle, from mountain to desert, the title becomes clearer. This is a beautiful country, hidden not because its beauty is hard to find, but because so many have been taught to look elsewhere. They heard the noise before they saw the water. They received the warning before they felt the wind. They inherited the fear before they stood beneath the open sky. But here among cenotes, coastlines, waterfalls, forests, mountains, and deserts, the old frame cannot hold. The land keeps widening. The colors keep changing. The silence keeps revealing more than the headlines ever could. Mexico is not defined by fear. It is also defined by light, moving through water, by clouds touching the highlands, by waves breaking at sunset, by forests breathing after rain, and by desert skies so wide they seem to erase every small idea placed beneath them. As the natural landscapes begin to fade behind us, another rhythm rises from the streets. It is faster, brighter, more restless. The sound changes from wind and water to engines, footsteps, conversations, music behind open doors, and the low electric hum of a city still moving after dark. This too is Mexico, not frozen in ancient stone, not limited to villages, coastlines, or old-world color, but present, inventive, complicated, and fully alive. In Mexico City, the skyline catches the late sun before the streets begin to glow. Glass towers stand beyond older facades. Traffic moves in long red and white streams. Trees soften the avenues. Cafes fill with voices. Parks open like pockets of air inside the city's density. The past has not disappeared here, but it does not stand alone. It shares space with bookstores, galleries, apartments, offices, bicycles, murals, restaurants, and young people moving through the day with the confidence of a country still being imagined. To see modern Mexico clearly, we have to let go of the idea that tradition and change are opposites. Here, they often walk on the same sidewalk. A historic building may stand beside a contemporary storefront. A street vendor may serve food beneath the shadow of modern architecture. A mural may turn a concrete wall into memory protest humor or beauty. In one direction, church bells. In another, traffic lights. Somewhere between them, a musician starts playing, and the city absorbs the sound without breaking its stride. In neighborhoods lined with trees, the pace softens. People sit at outdoor tables with coffee laptops, books, and long conversations. Dogs pull gently at leashes. Cyclists pass through the afternoon light. Windows reflect moving clouds. The scene feels both local and global, familiar, and unmistakably Mexican at the same time. It is not a postcard version of the country. It is daily modern life full of style, pressure, creativity, and motion. Art appears everywhere. Sometimes in galleries, sometimes on walls, sometimes in the way a small business paints its doorway or arranges its tables toward the street. Murals stretch across buildings with faces, symbols, colors, and stories too large to remain indoors. They make the city feel spoken through, as if the walls themselves have become part of the conversation. In this urban Mexico, beauty is not only inherited, it is constantly being made. Modern Mexico is not simple, and it should not be described as if it were. Its cities carry pressure, inequality, speed, ambition, beauty, and contradiction all at once. But complexity does not make a place less alive. It makes it more human. The mistake is to see complexity only as a problem, instead of also seeing the creativity that grows within it, the resilience that shapes daily life, and the imagination that keeps changing the streets one detail at a time. This is where old misconceptions begin to feel especially outdated. They cannot explain the energy of a city waking before sunrise. They cannot hold the quiet focus of a designer in a studio, the warmth of a crowded cafe, the color of a mural after rain, the glow of a bookstore window, or the movement of commuters crossing beneath towers and trees. They cannot explain a country that remembers deeply while still looking forward. And beyond the capital, other urban spaces carry their own pulse. Streets light up in the evening. Markets continue into the night. Historic centers become meeting places for students, families, musicians, artists, and travelers. The modern country is not one skyline or one neighborhood. It is a network of living places, each holding its own balance between inheritance and reinvention. The beauty here is different from the coast, different from the desert, different from the ruins. It is made of motion, a train of headlights along an avenue, a waiter placing chairs outside before dinner, a young artist carrying canvases through a doorway, friends laughing beneath a mural, a cyclist passing under trees, a kitchen lit late into the night. These moments do not ask to represent the whole country. They simply show that it is still becoming. Mexico's present does not erase its past. It carries it forward in new forms. Ancient memory becomes design, color, becomes identity food, becomes innovation music, becomes movement, and public space becomes a stage where history and the present meet every day. The country is not trapped inside the image others created for it. It is far too alive for that. As the city lights spread across the night, the story grows wider again. Mexico is not only old, not only natural, not only traditional, not only misunderstood. It is creative, layered, urban, youthful, and changing. It holds beauty in stone and water, yes, but also in glass concrete murals, music kitchens, cafes, crowded sidewalks, and the restless glow of streets that refuse to go quiet. And once we see this modern life beside the ancient memory, beside the everyday warmth, beside the impossible landscapes, the country becomes harder to reduce and easier to respect. It is not a frozen image. It is a living nation moving through time with all the tension, grace, difficulty, and imagination that life requires. By the end of the journey, the first image feels smaller than it once did. The headlines, the warnings, the borrowed assumptions, they have not vanished, but they no longer fill the frame. Around them, something larger has appeared. Coastlines at sunset, ruins in golden light, markets opening in the morning, mountains folded in mist, city streets glowing after dark. Faces, hands, voices, colors, and memories that were always there waiting for a slower gaze. Mexico does not become beautiful only when it is understood. It was beautiful before any outsider looked closely. The change happens in the viewer. The eye grows more patient. The story becomes less narrow. A place once reduced to fragments begins to return to its full shape, not as a perfect country, not as a simple one, but as a living nation of extraordinary depth. What remains when the misconceptions fade is not a single postcard image. It is 1,000 small truths. The sea pulling silver light across the shore. A vendor arranging flowers before the heat of the day. Ancient steps holding the shadow of centuries. A family crossing a plaza at dusk. A mural bright against a city wall. A desert sky opening wider than thought. A kitchen glowing at night, while food, laughter, and music gather in the air. This is the Mexico that cannot be contained by fear. It is old and modern, quiet and restless, tender and immense. It carries the memory of civilizations in stone, the warmth of daily life in its streets, the force of nature in water, mountains, forests, and deserts, and the creative pulse of cities that continue to reinvent themselves. Every layer changes the one before it. Every landscape adds another color to the truth. To see this country with care is not to ignore its complexity. It is to refuse the laziness of a single story. Every nation has shadows, but no nation should be known only by them. Mexico asks for a wider lens, one that can hold contradiction without losing beauty. One that can see difficulty and dignity in the same frame. One that understands that real places are never as simple as the stories told from far away. As evening falls, the country seems to gather itself in light. The ocean darkens slowly under a warm sky. Old walls hold the last glow of the sun. Markets begin to close, but the scent of food still lingers in the streets. In the mountains, clouds drift low over rooftops. In the cities, windows turn bright one by one, until the night becomes alive with movement. Not as one story, not as one image, but as thousands of landscapes, memories, colors, and lives moving together beneath the same wide sky. This is Mexico beyond misconception, ancient in its roots, human in its warmth, powerful in its nature, modern in its pulse, and filled with a light that becomes impossible to forget.